Hello everybody, my name is Rachel and today it's time for my favorite books of 2015. I tried really hard to make a top 10 list and I almost succeeded. I actually have 12 favorites and I decided to not torture myself by trying to narrow it down from there because it was really hard this year. I also haven't ranked these, but I'm going to number them just for convenience's sake. Number 1 is The Steerswoman by Rosemary Kirstine. This is the first book in her Steerswoman series and it's a stand-in for all 4 books that I read this year because they were all amazing. This series and the first book I think is really based on that really famous quote by Arthur C. Clarke that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. You have a steerswoman, a woman from an order of people who value information, the free flow of knowledge, and they're always asking questions about the world and trying to educate other people. She sets off in the first book, The Steerswoman, to answer questions about the origin of these mysterious blue gems that she has come across, and as she goes to seek answers, she unravels a bunch of mysteries involving what are really the dragons, what are really the wizards of this world, and you as the reader can tell pretty early on that this is a science fictional world, though it initially appears to be fantasy, and the people who live there don't know that the planet is being terraformed for them. This is an amazing book, an amazing story, just brilliant ideas, and really lovely to read. For number 2, I've been saying for most of the year that Anathem by Neil Stephenson is still one of my favorite books of the year, and yes, it is still one of my favorite books of the year, and my favorite book that I've read by Stephenson so far. This story follows a teenage boy named Erasmus who is a Fra at a consent, which is a cloistered sanctuary for mathematicians, scientists, philosophers, keeping them safe and sequestered away from the corrupting influences of the outside world. It's kind of like a reverse monastery, I guess. They're not actually religious. And then very abruptly, within a week, everything that is normal in Erasmus's life gets turned upside down as a cataclysmic event comes hurtling towards their world, and they need to save everybody. This is like science fiction mashed up with an action-adventure story. It's on a grand scale, tons of discussions, philosophical and scientific, about all sorts of things. I really need to reread this book eventually because it was amazing. For number 3, my reread of The Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula K. Le Guin was one of the highlights of my year. I did do a separate review on this book, which I think says everything I want to say about it for right now with this particular reread. It is beautifully written, touchingly written, about a man who comes to another planet as an emissary from the Ecumen, an alien organization, and has to bridge the gap between his culture and the Gathenian culture on this planet. Number 4 is The Fall of Hyperion. This is actually the second book in Dan Simmons' Hyperion Canto series. I really enjoyed the first book called Hyperion, and it follows these people, a group for the last pilgrimage to see the Shrike in the time tombs on the planet Hyperion. They're all mysteriously connected to each other and to the Shrike and are going there to get answers. The Fall of Hyperion is the second half and conclusion to the Pilgrim's story, and while Hyperion was amazing and just so great to read, The Fall of Hyperion was even better for me, maybe because there are a lot of answers in it, but it had all of the energy and mysteries and great writing and plotting and characters that the first book had, elevated to the next level. I also did a short video on this, though if you definitely don't want to be spoiled about anything at all in the series, maybe don't watch that. Number 5 is Mirror Dance by Lois McMaster Bujold, and this is sort of a stand-in for all of the excellent Vorkosigan novels that I read this past year, but Mirror Dance is one of the best in the entire series. I did do a kind of spoilery discussion of this book, discussing its themes, issues, and how I felt about all of that stuff, but essentially this is the story of Miles and his twin clone brother Mark dealing with their difficulties with each other and pushing away from each other, especially Mark. It is a very psychological book. It is heartbreaking, yes, because they have issues and they are so similar and yet so different, and they, especially for Mark, and his desire for a family and for love and all these things that he never had that Miles has. It makes me sad and melancholy just thinking about it now. Definitely a book I will reread in the series. Number 6 is The Just City by Jo Walton, the first book in her Thessaly series. I have done a separate review on this book, so I'm not going to talk about it too much. The premise of the series is that the goddess Athena creates a real-world city based on Plato's The Republic, the Just City. She brings people to live there, and they try to follow the rules that Plato set out, but it may or may not work very well. This series is a beautiful blend of science fiction, Greek and Roman mythology, philosophy, all sorts of things. Really, really fascinating to read, and oh, I'm so waiting for the third and final book in the series to come out in 2016. Number 7 is Ancillary Mercy by Ann Leckie, the third and final book in her Imperial Roch trilogy. I can't say too much about this, honestly, because it is the end of the series and I don't want to spoil people for anything, but I thought this was truly a great conclusion for the series. The more I think about how it ended, the more I think that this was just so well balanced. A lot of times, a final book in a series maybe doesn't answer all the questions, or it goes too far and it ends way after the point where it really should have ended. This answered just enough of the questions, left just enough stuff open-ended that it was satisfying, but also said it's not really the end. There may never be another book that features Breck and all of these characters, but it's still there. There's not this incredible close-the-door sense of finality to it, and I like that. It's such a great book. It is well written, greatly plotted, just an overall series that is amazing. Number 8 is Trading in Danger by Elizabeth Moon. This is the first book in the Vada's War military sci-fi space opera series, and yeah, it's a stand-in for that entire series because I loved it so much. This first book I did do a review on. It introduces the character of Kailara Vada, who is kicked out from military academy for a scandal that she's not really responsible for. Her family is attacked by some mysterious source, their trading company starts to fall apart, and it seems like Kai has to save both her family's business and the safety of the rest of known colonized space. This was a fast-paced series that seems to encapsulate all the things that I really enjoy about military science fiction, from the characters, to the writing, to the battle sequences, to just the overall plot and world building of the series. Moon is not the best world builder in science fiction, but this series worked on so many levels for me. Number 9 is the only classic that made this list, and that is North and South by Elizabeth Gaskell. But North and South blew me away. I was not prepared at all for how much I was going to love this book. I thought it would be good. I thought it would appeal to the part of me that really enjoys Pride and Prejudice, and it did. This is kind of like Pride and Prejudice set in the industrial manufacturing world, and I think that the romance at the heart of the story is more realistic. I really felt like the two main characters, while they had those initial misunderstandings and difficulties bridging the gap between their very different ways of life, that it played out more realistically and subtly over time than the romance in Pride and Prejudice did. It's still kind of a feel-good story, but overall I think the realism in the story made it even better for me. Number 10 is The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. I think this has gotta be the biggest breakout star in science fiction on BookTube this year because everybody has been reading it, everybody has been loving it. I am no exception to this. It is delightful, beautiful, funny, heartbreaking. It's so much about these characters and their relationships with each other, and a lot of cross-species relationships, a lot of cross-cultural relationships. It seems to speak so much about tolerance and love in the world, that these things can overcome so many differences. That's what I'm always going to think about when I think about this book. If you want to know more about the plot and what I really, really loved about it in more detail, I did a separate review video on this and I will link it for you. Number 11 is The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin, the first book in her new fantasy series called The Broken Earth. Oh, so good. This is a fantasy series where the big bad is the weather, the geography, cataclysmic events like earthquakes and volcanoes that, you know, it's not necessarily other people, it's you against the world in a way. Now there are, you know, people with sort of magical supernatural powers called origins who can influence the geography and like work with rock and metal and stuff. The idea of this entire world being threatened by the 5th season, a period of time when their world becomes almost completely uninhabitable and having to survive this and keep their species going. It was great, and the way that these 3 main characters' stories are woven together, and I didn't see it coming about how they were connected by the end. This was so well structured and written. I have been reading Jemison's work for the past couple of years. I've read, I think, all but one of her books now, and I have to say that I think she's slowly becoming a better writer. There's something about this book, I read it and went, Jemison is truly at the top of her game now. She has honed her skill, she's honed her craft, and this is some of the best fantasy that I'm going to be reading for the next couple of years. The 12th and final book from my favorites of 2015 list is The Sparrow by Mary Doria Russell, and I feel like this actually shouldn't be the last one that I mention in this video, but it is going to be. I go back and I review what I have rated books a couple months after I've read them, you know, and I adjust their ratings based on how much they really did or did not stick with me. And The Sparrow by Mary Doria Russell, I initially rated 4 stars. I thought it was really good, and then it just sat there in my heart and in my brain and kept coming up. I kept being reminded of this book when I was reading other books. Like I read Planetfall a couple of days ago, and just for some reason was reminded again of The Sparrow, and the heartbreak at the end of that book and the desire to still continue on with that story and that character and all of that. It's probably one of the longest lasting books this year for me. I mean, The Left Hand of Darkness will always be with me, but this book, probably because it was so emotional and intense and it hurt so good. I did a separate review on this to explain the plot and more of that, so definitely go watch that. But I love this book, and it's a slow burn. I didn't realize how much I loved it until I really sat down to finalize this list. Great science fiction, and also a great story about religious faith. Those are my favorite books of 2015. If you've read any of these, if these happen to be any of your favorites from this year, please comment down below and let me know. Thank you guys so much for watching. This is probably gonna be one of my last videos, if not the last video I do in 2015, so thank you guys so much for an amazing year. I read a lot of great books this year, but I also met and talked to a lot of great people, and that is probably worth more to me than all of the books I can read in one year. So thank you guys so much, and I'll be back to talk to you again soon. Bye.